can't possibly be real. It can't possibly be real that this player has some input over who the manager is, over who the director of football is, over who the signings are. He's a player. Welcome to this week's edition of One-to-One with Simon Jordan. Of course, remember to keep liking and subscribing and to leave your questions in the comment section below. But let's get on with this week's show. If I'm Ten Hag, I would take a good hard look at what I've got in the building, not what I think I've got in the building or not what I've seen playing for other managers, what I've actually got in the building. Now, whatever Harry Maguire is or isn't, he isn't an £80 million footballer, but he is because someone was prepared to pay that. But in quality terms, I don't think he is. Is he where he's currently playing? Probably not. Is he going to be another Rio Ferdinand or Vidic or Jaap Stam? No, he's not, because those sort of centre-halves are as rare as rocking horse. But in this instance, Maguire is someone you should look at and then evaluate whether you're going to change him. Well, we can all sit here saying, get rid of him, fire him, change that, out the board. It becomes, who do you replace them with? So with that in mind, he's got to try to help rebuild Maguire. I'm not an admirer of Maguire's. I think he's false in his outlooks towards the media. And I don't think he's a great player. And I know that they build this idea that when he plays for England, he's a colossus of which England's achievements were built upon. But when it comes to the domestic football, where you're playing competitive games every single week, rather than a mixture of competitive and non-competitive games in World Cups, when you're playing also run teams and top teams, but not in any particular amount of prolific games, he doesn't get shown up, but he does in the Premier League. So to answer your question, I think Ten Hag's got to have a good look. If he thinks he can improve him, because he needs to improve, then work with him. If he doesn't, sell him, but then it becomes about who replaces him. Sky Sports pundits, there's a few of them that grate on me. I mean, I don't like listening to Mika Richards guffaw like a donkey all afternoon, and I'm not hugely interested in listening to Jamie Redknapp put me to sleep for 90 minutes, where I come out of that without actually learning anything, because I don't think he says anything other than platitudes. I have to say that in equal measure, Neville enthuses me, Gary Neville enthuses me and annoys me, because he enthuses me when he talks about the game and talks about the live action, because it's seeing it through such an insightful set of eyes, and I get to watch and listen to someone that's really speaking from real experience and giving me an insight into the game or what's going on. And then I find myself in an enraged state when I listen to some of the self-serving drivel that he comes out with when he talks about things that he clearly doesn't understand. He's got a massive soapbox, and I understand he's been put on it, and I understand he's Sky's poster boy. But there is a point where you get to the scenario where you say, hang on a second, you know, someone sent you a memo somewhere along the line that your opinion is unassailable, where it isn't, because a lot of what you say or what Gary says doesn't stand up. It doesn't stand up about independent regulation. It didn't stand up about the European Super League. It doesn't stand up about a lot of aspects. And whilst I think it's interesting, what I do think would be interesting if someone like Gary Neville had the balls to come and sit on a show with me, or me and Danny Kelly, or me and Jim White, and actually have someone that really questions the observations that he makes. Because when you're talking about independent regulation and the club that you own probably doesn't comply with the regulation it's currently under, when you've got vested interest in it because you want to be part of it, yet you're espousing the world of your views on it, I find it a little bit hypocritical. And I don't think what he says has any real substance behind it. So I find that irritating. But obviously on the flip side of it, when I'm listening to him talk about something he really does know about, which is the action on the pitch, it's very interesting. But compared to Souness and Keane, that give you this overview, when Souness talks, he's one of the few pundits that I want to listen to and stop and engage with, or more to the point, just listen to. And when Keane speaks, you're going to get something that might resemble media gold. You might not always agree with it, but you're going to come away thinking, that was interesting, that was something I didn't think of. And I think Keane's got the courage of his convictions, albeit sometimes disappearing into a sort of pantomime villain role. Spurs fans should be full of optimism. They should be full of belief that they've got a manager that's not only a live one and a current one, but probably has got the board's attention. If anyone's labouring under the illusion that despite Conte's best intentions of misdirection, that his brief wasn't to get Spurs into the top 4 when Daniel brought him in, then they're not on point. He was brought in to achieve that. Go to the genesis of the question. No, not get carried away, because you're not going to win the league. You're not going to overtake Man City and Liverpool, but you are going to, I think, start laying some real foundations for building a team that's going to win something. I wouldn't be surprised if you won something next season. I wouldn't be surprised if you won a pot, whether that be a League Cup or dropping out of the Champions League at a stage and dropping into the Europa League and taking that tournament to a position where Spurs could win something. So getting carried away is the gift of all supporters, because if you don't get carried away, then you don't have emotivity and emotion and passion. And if you don't have that, then what do you have when you're watching your club? Of course, the flip side of having lots of expectations is if people don't reach those heights, you become even more disappointed. So I think that with some of the signings that Tottenham are making, some of the players that they brought in last year that they must retain, some of the improvements in some of the players that are already there, that you should be optimistic for Tottenham, but you should temper that by saying our optimism should be about maintaining a position in the top 4. Should West Ham take a punt on Anthony Martial? I would say absolutely not. On what basis? What's he done for Manchester United? What did he do when he went out on loan? What does his attitude appear to be like? I would think he is one to keep at arm's length, or more to the point, to steer well clear of. Look, I mean, David Moyes is no fool. The coaching staff he has behind him is no fool. If they think and they can see something in this boy they can turn, that's great. You know, at one point, David Moyes turned Marko Arnautovic into something more compelling than a problem player. So you can make that argument. But for me, no, Martial is one of those I'd send anywhere in a cab. If I went back to Palace in some sort of parallel universe and I had to hire either Danny Murphy, Trevor Sinclair or Martin Keown, who would I take in the management role? Well, it would be difficult because it's sort of a feast and famine mentality there. If I wanted to worry about the well-being of my players and needed them looking after better because they were being treated terribly on £50,000 a week, I'd bring in Martin to make sure that their bottoms were being wiped. If I wanted to amuse them and take them into the area of mirth and mayhem and have everybody point the finger at us and have a laugh, I'd bring in Trevor Sinclair. If I wanted to bring a dark cloud over the place, a bit like Eeyore, I'd bring Danny Murphy in. But in real terms, if I was going to look at a solution, I'd like to morph them all into one and take the gravitas at times of Martin Keown, take the honesty, albeit misguided sometimes, from Trevor Sinclair, and also some of the tactical insight from Danny Murphy, morph it into one perfect component and put that in as the manager. I mean, I'm an admirer of Jack Grealish as a footballer and deeply disinterested and ambivalent towards him as a personality and person. They're young players, they're given inordinate amounts of money. Superimpose your life. Superimpose your life to being 25, 26 years of age and even younger, being given tens of millions of pounds, being adored by people and being able to be run around and have your backside wiped by everybody and wonder how you might be affected in your personal life because you're not mature enough to know the difference. Now, where he goes off the pitch is for him to develop and mature. How that hurts him. It's ironic that Southgate was talking in the papers, Gareth Southgate, about Jack Grealish, the player, and how last year he was being pilloried for not picking him, and this year he may be pilloried for picking him. I mean, you look at his season at Man City, it's very difficult to slot in a side when you've come from Aston Villa, with no disrespect to Aston Villa intended, because I happen to be a great admirer of Aston Villa, but the quality of player, expectation and outcome at Man City is far greater than it is at Villa. So he was always going to be a little bit of a bit part player until he finds his feet, metaphorically and literally, and finds his space and starts to dominate the dressing room in terms of their expectation of a talented player. Now, if I'm right, 3 goals and 3 assists, if I'm right, is not impressive stats, and it certainly is impressive stats enough to be volunteering opinions on players like Almiron from Newcastle. But I think we have to balance this off. I mean, I've called him a moron because the very definition of a moron is perhaps somebody who repeats stupid behaviour and keeps on repeating it and keeps on putting himself in the way of criticism.